Hey, experimentalist. This is Wade. Today we have a special guest because this is my first time meeting Scotty, who I did not know until about a week ago. I started seeing some advertisements on Instagram about a thing called Atlanta Puppetry Jam. I was like, what? Why don't I know about this? I messaged Scotty to find out more about it, and here we are. So, Scotty, before we actually get into the Atlanta Puppetry Jam, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? I see lots of puppets all around you. Who are you, and how did you get first involved with puppetry?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Scottie Rowell, they, them. I am the owner of Teller Productions, which is based here in Atlanta, a production company that specializes in storytelling and puppetry. And I kind of got involved with puppetry because I grew up in super rural Georgia and had no performing arts. So, puppetry and storytelling were kind of my ways to have other people to perform with. And it kind of took off from there. And I went to Kennesaw State University, and they gave me a lot of opportunities to utilize puppets while I was there. And I kind of did a dual concentration while I was there to kind of make things work for puppetry. I did musical theater performance and costume design. And while I was going to school full time, I started working full time at the Center of Puppetry Arts at the same time, going to school full time and working full time, which was kind of a nightmare, but
As you
it was
do.
great
Yep.
because I graduated with a lot of experience otherwise. So yeah, I was in the puppet shop as a builder. I was kind of their foam and fabric specialist, mostly doing all the soft goods for puppets. Yeah, so that's the briefest of brief things.
Sure, sure. So when did the interest in puppets first start for you? What age were you?
Oh, I don't know. It was kind of always there. I was always enamored by them, always fascinated by them, and I was always a maker, and wanting to figure things out. I'm neurodivergent and very much an engineer-oriented brain, and I love like figuring out how things work, or kind of come up with my own ways of how things work. And puppetry kind of works so well with that, in terms of mechanisms and kind of the homespun nature of figuring things out. So it was kind of always there. I kind of always loved the bringing to I love always loved bringing objects to life and playing with them because I was a you know solo alone kid, so puppetry kind of worked really great for
Yes.
me.
Um, excuse me, I don't know your age, but I would assume that there
You're good.
probably was not YouTube around, or maybe just started
No,
at the time or something like that. So, how, as a young kid, how did you figure out how to create your own puppets?
no, YouTube started like in college for me.
Okay.
Um, uh, so I kind of watched movies and videos and kind of like played around to see, well, how can I create hand puppets? And mine hand puppets I was creating, the innards were not sophisticated at all. I tried to like make the outside look good. Um, there were in my public library and in my school library. My public library had like three books on puppetry, one of which I had checked out for so long that I was scared to take it back because there was a lot of like overdue um, charges for it. It was just like some like little kid book, like a. I remember being too old for the book, but it was geared towards like little kids. But it was one of the only books I had ever seen that like tried to explain this is a rod puppet, this is how rod puppets come together, and they kind of did different sections of like this is Asian puppetry, this is Czech marionettes, this is marionettes, and this is hand puppets, and I was just enamored by it, and I kept it so long that eventually the library redid their card catalog system, and so the book wasn't even in their system anymore. So I was like, great, I'll just keep the book. I don't have to give it back.
Right.
And I kept it for a long time. And then in my high school library, there was a book that was actually donated by the Center for Puppetry Arts to different public schools, and there was actually a stamp on the side saying this book was provided by. I can't remember the book. The I need to look it up because like the cover is very vivid for me, and my librarian kind of got annoyed and was like, "You can't check this book out anymore." And so I would just go into the library and look at it. But it was a book that was it was kind of a broad strokes of puppetry as well. But I remember specifically they focused a lot on like parade puppets and large scale puppets because that was the first time I had ever seen like um, polystyrene foam being carved with like a hot wire was part of this book. And that's when I was like, oh, puppets are scalable. Like we can make this bigger and more intense. And yeah, so like I devoured whatever books I could get a hold of, which was, they were few and far between
Sure, sure. So it
with no
sounds like
YouTube.
hand puppets were some of the first puppets that you made. Where'd you go from there?
Yeah, hand
Which
puppets.
ones were the easier for you to kind of figure out, and which ones were harder?
I think hand puppets just started because I think they're the most accessible in terms of you see the Muppets and you try and replicate that. That's why it happens a lot for people. That's why there's also a lot of puppet artists that really focus on that style of puppetry. Um, and so those were kind of the easiest for me to figure out. And then uh, you know, while I was still very young when I was working at this when I started working at the Center of Puppetry Arts. I very specifically remember I I was like 20, like 19 or 20. Because I remember one time Jason Hines, who I love tremendously, he went on this rant about how I would never hire somebody under 21 to be a puppet builder here. And he thought I was older, and I just sat there just continuing to work. I was like, I'm not gonna let him know that I'm actually like a baby sitting over here. But I that's working at the Center Puppetry Arts, actually seeing shows at the Center Puppetry Arts
Yeah.
was what really started to broaden me out into other styles of puppetry. Because I mean, I saw some like videos here and there of like other styles of puppetry, mostly like rod puppetry or like shadow puppets, um, that sort of thing. But it was hard to like come about videos of different types and different styles.
Yeah.
So it was going to the Center Puppetry Arts on like field trips back in grade school that really like broke me open. Because like when I was in grade school, it was back when like a lot of the center puppetry art shows were like puppetry shows. And like, yes, there's still puppet shows, but like a lot of the shows I saw were nonverbal.
Mm.
I remember the first show I saw there was in first grade, and it was like an under the sea show that they haven't brought back in ages, but it was
Mm.
like set inside of a submarine. And so it was shadow puppets meet like other styles of puppets that come up behind a playboard and stuff.
Interesting. So
There
a
was a
bit more
fiddler
like
crab that kind of hosted the show.
yeah, a bit more like the show Rainforest then, where you don't have.
Yeah,
Hmm.
or like the in third grade, I very specifically remember seeing the old version of dinosaurs. They kind of redid dinosaurs where there was more like a narrator and like the birds like talking about how like they're descendants of dinosaurs. I saw like the old version with like this really creepy but amazing professor puppet that was a rod pup like a check black rod puppet, and then there were tons of like body puppets in the show. Which actually the show was kind of scary to me. I vividly remember, but I was like, oh, body puppets are I guess puppets too, and that kind of broke me open and like, oh, I guess mascots are puppets too, and that kind of like can just continue to open my world. But still, like as far as like me making at home, I mostly made hand puppets just because I kind of like saw avenues to utilize them because I
Yeah.
also dabbled a lot in like um film. It was really just a family camcorder that I mostly like used for stop motion animation videos and then some like small puppet video stuff. But I never could really work out to get a monitor set up
Mm.
with my little camcorder because there was no like inputs for that sort of thing. Everything's so much easier.
Right.
uh, it's like I think a lot about actually about the technology I have available to me now and like what my a younger Scotty would have done with that and like would have
Yeah.
been thrilled. And like it puts me in the space of like you have so many assets, just go with it and play. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but then also working at the Center Puppetry Arts was tremendous because while I was there, we ended up doing a lot of marionette shows.
Mm.
Um, and that was a style like a lot of puppeteers don't experience marionette because there's much more tools involved. You
Yep.
need a bridge or you need short string puppets, and so it's such a niche artistry for just doing marionette work that I've dabbled with and played with, but I really want to like have some sort of like intensive where I really just focus on marionette work at some point. But I mostly costume all the marionettes while I was at the Center Puppetry Arts. But I really loved being there and seeing Jason go into how to build them and the artistry behind that. So yeah,
And how long were
I'm
you?
kind of a fan of all styles.
Yeah, yeah. How
I
long
was
were
there
you there for?
I was there off and on for about 5 years, so I was an
Okay.
overhire. But it was this particular era where like they were consistently doing lots of new shows. So like there was times where like one show rolled right into the next one, or sometimes overlapped because there would be remounting shows that they would also need help with. So consistently I was there for a good solid 3.5 years, but I was there for over the span of 5 years. My
Mm.
last two projects. specifically were Peter Pan, the Michael Haverty Peter Pan, and
Okay.
then Ruth and the Green Book. I costumed those. The first iteration of Ruth and the Green Book, I costumed those puppets.
Gotcha. And they just brought that one back not too long ago.
Yeah, they did. I was
Yeah.
excited to see that came back around.
Yeah. Yeah.
My first show was Duke Ellington's Cat, which I was so excited they brought that back recently
Yeah.
because I they hadn't brought that back at all, and that was 2007 or 2008. I remember specifically I was on like Thanksgiving break from college and like went home, and I got a call from my mentor, like my college professor, my advisor, and he was like he had done a lot of costume work at Center Puppetry Arts, and he called and he's like, hey, they're kind of desperate at Center Puppetry Arts for some puppetry help. Are you interested? And I was like, bye, mom. Like it was like the day after Thanksgiving, and I like hightailed it back to Atlanta because I was like, I'm gonna take this opportunity as because it was what I would want to do after I graduated. So like, why not go ahead and do it? Also, because I came from low income like poverty, and I needed income anyway. So
Sure. Sure. Um,
yeah,
so I gotta know, did Jason ever get the truth from you? Did he ever know your actual age?
yeah. He eventually it eventually came out years later when I was more willing to be like, yeah, we can go grab a beer now, because I couldn't have grabbed a beer back when he made that tangent. Like there was lots of times where I was like, I'm in over my head just because I was so young. I actually I have a friend now who interned like back in the day when they did do like a lot of puppet shop interns, and he was actually just out of high school, and I was like, okay, I thought I was young. You like knew nothing, but I remember when I came in for Duke Ellington's Cat, they did like there was just so they just really needed help, and so they said we're gonna do like a trial like test day. There's no time for an interview, so how about you work for a day, and we'll see or not whether or not this is like or not jives. And so I was making soft bodies for some rod puppet rats that are in the show, and I was making the legs. I was making these little like kneecaps, or essentially like little pillows, where you have to like stuff them really, 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 really tight in order to make the leg not bend too far.
Hmm.
And I was trying to make like I think I was making like 10 of these little kneecaps, and I was just so I wanted the job so badly, and I eventually stabbed myself and I bled all over these little kneecaps. And I like stitched them to the puppets with the blood side against the puppets because I was just like, nobody can know that I bled all over these puppets. I want this job so bad. And I think about these little things like that. I think about Jason going on a tangent about like he would never hire anybody below 21. Like it was such an impactful time for me because I was just like a sponge for learning about puppetry at that point, like wanting to know everything.
Oh, what a great story. So,
Yeah.
so at the time that you get out of college and you stop interning over at the center, where do you go then? Are we go ahead?
Yeah, so I didn't actually intern at the center. I was there as an employee. I was being
Oh,
paid.
okay.
Um, yeah, which was great. It was wonderful. They were like, you know, you're still in college, but you have the skill set that we need. Um, so I worked there for a long time. While I was there, 2008, like um, whatever crash happened,
Right.
the recession happened,
Yep.
and with nonprofits, a lot of their money is locked up a couple of years in advance. So like I remember like a lot of that didn't really hit the Center of Puppetry Arts until like 2010, right when I was graduating college, because they were like, Scotty, this was great. We don't really have any new shows for you for a while. Um, and so I was still like dabbling with stuff for their Center of Puppetry Arts, and then I started working as a dresser at the Alliance Theater on wardrobe crew,
Hmm.
just because my costume design background put me in a good position to do that, and it was good money, it was full time work. So I was doing that. I was so eventually I started dressing, and then when the center did have a couple more shows in like 2011 and 2012, I think is when 2012 is when Ruth and the Green Book happened. So I was dressing and I was working at the Center of Puppetry Arts, and then eventually I was in a space with the Alliance. I was like, I don't really think I need to be dressing anymore because hey, I kind of got into this rut where, not rut, it was wonderful. I was working, but I wasn't performing anymore. I was just like building and designing. And I was like, I need to make more space to perform when I can. And the Alliance Theater started ramping up their Theater for the Very Young season. Theater for the Very Young is specifically shows that are developed for toddlers, so 0 to age 5. It's a type of theater that really started in London back in the 70s, but didn't take off until you know, 2013, 2014 here in America, like really started to take off. And the Alliance Theater was one of the kind of the forefront of no, we're pushing and investing money in this. And so they said, well, we like your work in puppetry, Scotty. Could you design puppets and costumes for some of these toddler shows? And so that kind of like started me kind of doing my own thing, like independently. And I did dabbled some stuff here in town. I like designed for a show at Synchronicity or eventually at Dad's Garage and some puppets. But that was like consistently, I was doing one or two shows there at the at the Alliance Theater, designing puppets and costumes and sometimes sets. Um, and I was doing a lot of really great work with them, but with those shows, they weren't going through the Alliance Theater proper. So like it was like education was almost like its own theater company. So I was building the puppets, I was building the costumes. It wasn't going through the costume shop. So eventually I was like, this is great, Alliance Theater. You got too much work for me. So that's when I founded my LLC, Teller Productions, so that I can more easily hire on other people to help with some of these things. And things kind of grew from there. Um, the Alliance Theater kind of kept calling for some of these design gigs, and it worked really well. And then I kind of got a connection with the Georgia Aquarium, and they said, "This is great. Could you actually produce a show outright?" And I was like, "Well, sure." So instead of just designing a building for existing scripts, we started developing those scripts. Just because I had this history of doing storytelling. I toured as a storyteller back in college with the KSU Tellers. I did independent work as Scottie the Teller. And so I already had this skill set for writing.
Yeah.
And then with the Alliance Theater, working on these shows for toddlers. So I started producing shows outright for the Georgia Aquarium, where it was kind of like turnkey, where we fully produced the show. They provided the performer, and then we're like, okay, here's your show. Call us when you need us. Like we would rehearse with them and stuff. So it was a kit show, and then we provided everything but like the performer. It's like what theme parks do
Yeah.
with working
Yeah.
with production companies. Also, so I started working with Stone Mountain Park a lot. I used to refurb their mascots in order to afford my workshop spaces. Um, yeah, and it's kind of just grown and grown from there. Now I a lot of my work is with the Kennedy Center in Washington D.C. They've commissioned a few shows now, and I puppet directed some of their, oh, I puppet directed other projects for them, mostly Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, the musical, the world premiere of that, and then the two consecutive national tours, which was just like them hiring Scottie Rowell. Then they've had other projects where they've commissioned us to do shows outright. They've commissioned, um, well, for a while I was producing the toddler shows for the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. Teller Productions was doing that. Um, and the Kennedy Center called for some of those for the National Symphony Orchestra, and then they've commissioned some other shows outright. Yeah, that's
That's
kind
a
of
that's
the whirlwind of things.
that's pretty incredible. That's yeah. So it's just kind of word of mouth and your stick-to-itiveness of continually pushing out work that got you to kind of where you are now. That's fantastic.
Trying to. I mean, I will say it hasn't been like super consistent over the years. Also, especially with the pandemic, because producing toddler shows, toddlers were the last people to be able to get vaccinated. So like theater for the very young didn't come back for a good many years. It wasn't until, you know, end of 2022, 2023 that I was getting back towards the income I had pre-pandemic. I'm still not back to the income that I had just because so many of these places I was working with like completely gutted their education programs and gutted their teams. So
Right.
now like some of these places are hiring on education teams again, but it's like reinventing the wheel. I have to reestablish these relationships. And like the Georgia Aquarium doesn't even really have the entertainment department that they had. The Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, which we were doing a lot of work with, only have two education people, and they were hired late into the pandemic. So it's interesting, but it's
Yeah.
also been nice because it's also allowed me to transition my company a good bit. A few years ago, I completely made the transition to only using sustainable materials, so only repurposed materials or materials that are easily recycled. So we use lots of cardboard. Actually, the last full stage show that we produced for, or that we made for the Kennedy Center was all cardboard, and they loved it. They freaked out. And it's a show that's done us really well, and so I'm kind of keeping that avenue. Actually, that this pig back here is all cardboard. It was a photo op for our next show with them.
Yeah.
coming in their next season. Yeah.
Well, considering I know that not all your shows can be fully cardboarded, where are you getting your supplies to where you are able to keep up this sustainability?
Yeah, I'm just really resourceful.
Okay.
So some of it I've still been utilizing a lot of stock that I already had before I made the transition to otherwise. And then I'm sourcing from secondhand stores. Atlanta Green Theater shed is a really great space if people are looking for free materials. I don't know if you'll talk to in XPT if y'all talked about the Atlanta Green Theater Alliance at all.
I just recently heard about actually. I was doing a play with Thea Derev and Jennifer Kimball, who I guess is kind of part of that group as well. She was mentioning it. I was like, oh, well, this is really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
So,
People need to look them up.
yeah.
They have at the South River Arts Center, they have the AGT shed. Um Atlanta Green Theater, yeah, Atlanta Green Theater Association shed. And it's all materials people donate there and they give away for free. And it's not just materials, it's like power tools, it's shelving units, it's all that kind of stuff. Um so it's a good resource. And then just like knowing other artists, we're constantly like having little swap meets. I have a lot of little clubs that kind of meet here in my workshop space. We have a sewing club, and so they my the members of the sewing club will bring materials, and I'll get rid of materials. And so there's constantly this little Rolodex or gears kind of going in my brain of, okay, the next shows I've got coming up, X, Y, and Z. What materials do I kind of need to be thinking about to be utilized for those things? And honestly, it's made my work so much more fun, just
Yeah.
because like with the shows I was producing for the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra back years ago, they actually they needed shows very, very quickly. So a lot of them were like order a bunch of stuff off Amazon, alter it, transition it, and make it into the prop it needs to be. And it was a lot of waste. It was a lot of money. I mean, they paid for all of it, but it was still like this. It just hurt my heart. And a lot of those puppets, I just wasn't really into because I had to build them so quickly and in ways that I didn't really like jive with.
Yeah.
So now to like be like, well, let's design around the materials we have. Let's do an asset-based approach to theater. Um, which can make it a little trickier when if I'm working with like a specific client that wants something like fully rendered and specific. Thankfully, a lot of my clients now they don't want that sort of thing
Hmm.
anymore. You know, I I used to do a lot of like the Muppet characters. People would commission these hand puppets and stuff, and finally I'm in the space where I'm like, you know what? There's a lot of really great artists out there doing that, and I should recommend them instead of me doing those. And it's kind of like allowed me to explore what I really want to be doing, which right now is cardboard puppets and trick puppetry. There's a lot of trick puppetry I'm doing, like things that transform into other things.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Um, some of the people who are watching this might be interested in some of these clubs you just mentioned. Are
Uh-huh.
these things that are free to the public? Do you pay a fee to come in? And what kind of things are you teaching in these clubs?
Yeah, it's all free. So we have a sewing club. That's a little bit of a members club, but let's just talk. They can reach out to me. Sewing club is for experienced stitchers, where we just gather almost like a traditional sewing circle, except where individuals bring their own projects to work on, and we just kind of like work together. It started during that portion of the pandemic where we thought where everybody was okay and before Omicron hit. And
Yeah.
so like things are opening up and we just wanted to like come back together and gather. And it meets here at my workshop in Grant Park. Which because I've got my workshop and then there's a large shared space that we spill out into. So there's sewing club, there's a craft night that I've been trying to like make work. The last one I actually had a lot of RSVPs where it's a monthly craft night, similar to Sewing Club, but that's where people just can come and utilize the tools in the workshop.
Mm.
Because a lot of people like need a bandsaw, they need drills, and they don't have this sort of thing. And also it's a camaraderie thing where they can just bring a project to work on. But the last one I was supposed to have was in February, and it was the same day that I got hit by a truck while I was on a moped scooter. Um,
Wow.
and so
Okay.
I, yeah, so yeah, I've been pretty dinged up the past couple of months, and I've been progressively getting back to things. And so I was like, you know what, craft night will have to come back a little later. So there's craft night, and then also there is the Atlanta Puppet Jam, which is why you reached out. That is the newest club, which has been going really well. I announced it back in uh, early February, the week before I got hit by a truck, and I was in the space of like, do I still keep this going? Because it was going to start in March, and I was like, you know what? I need to charge my batteries. I need to be working with people, and so we've had three Atlanta Puppet Jams so far, and the turnout has been low, understandably, just because it
Yeah,
takes a while to get the word out about such things.
exactly.
But the people coming have been so energetic and here for it and here for playing, and that kind of stemmed. The Atlanta Puppet Jam stemmed from so uh, uh, a big part of what I do is I get called to puppet direct a lot of shows. I also get called to do a lot of workshops just because I have a very streamlined process for people to learn puppetry very quickly.
Mm.
And so that's why like somebody like the Kennedy Center will call, because like Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus. It was a role, if you've read the Pigeon books, it's a lot of like, I don't know, there's a lot to that character, the Mo Willems books. So they needed to hire somebody that could sing amazingly, could act really well, could dance, and then they also needed a puppeteer the entire show. And so they were like, we're going to really find that person. So they hired me so that I could like just come in and train the puppeteer. And I'd worked with the show's producer a number of times on some other projects. And he liked my approach for like teaching people really quickly on puppetry. But I've heard it from years from people of like, well, I want to get better at puppets, or I want to learn puppetry, but there's just not really good space to experiment
Yeah,
or fail beautifully.
right.
And I was like, oh, cool. And I was like, well, great. I'll just offer more of my workshops. And every time I offer the workshop, like, of course, for me to offer it independently, I need to ask for like a fee or a ticket price, and nobody ever wants to pay. um, which is fine. I mean, we as artists are on a budget or cash strapped, and I was like, you know what, let's try a different avenue. And that's when I was like, you know what, Puppet Jam, I need to be playing with puppets more. I am in the space with my artistry now where I'm making myself improvise a lot more with my puppets or experiment more with materials. And I was like, you know what, I should just open this up to more people and see if people just want to come and join for this. And that's kind of how the Puppet Jam kind of got started. Just because I've enjoy collaborating and having fun with these people, and the people who have been coming have been hungry for that too. They've been in their heads and they've been in a space of, well, I want to do puppetry, but how do I monetize that? That's not what we're doing. we're
Yeah,
we're coming together and playing, and we're coming together and playing in a way that's not product driven. Like, I love what XPT is and what XPT means and what you're experimenting with,
right,
but still at the end you're producing something that is going to be seen by people.
right.
And so there's a good sort of stress that comes with that. This is a bit different with the jam. With the jam, we are just jamming. We are just fooling around. The jam that happened on Saturday was we've started choosing a theme for each month. Um, and this month is toy theater, and it was me and just a couple other people, and we just had the best time like playing with these toy theater puppets, just coming up with the most nonsense crap. Like, it was just really great and very freeing
Yeah,
in a
yeah,
way that I think when I'm working with performers, sometimes like in the rehearsal process, they don't feel like allowed to like be free in those ways.
right.
So I'm like, okay, more people come and jam so that when we actually get to that place of making a product or going into a rehearsal process, they're gonna hopefully take that with them, of just trying things.
So in these jams, is not even necessarily a what we would normally term as a traditional performance. That it really is just a gathering of people, and you don't necessarily need like a story idea, that you just kind of bring your puppet or just bring yourself, and you could everyone just plays.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really what we're doing.
Okay.
There is an opportunity though, if people do want to bring something that they want to share or get feedback on. Like a couple puppet jams ago, there's a few of us puppeteers who started performing in Gina Rikiki's. She's a amazing performer here in
Yeah,
town, but
yeah,
she has
yeah.
a new show
At
called
the red
Joy's
light.
Deficit at Red Light Cafe.
Yep.
Yeah, so I performed in the very first one, and I'm performing in the one coming up on Monday. But Jeffrey Schwartz's, who's a puppeteer in town, he performed in the last one in March, and so like he said, "Hey, could I try out our act at the next to last like Atlanta Puppet Jam?" And so he just came and did his act after we got done with what we were doing. So people can bring stuff to share and get feedback if they want to, and we usually reserve that for like the last like 20 or 30 minutes of the jam. Otherwise, we're just playing. The very first jam, we had a lot of people who'd never really done puppetry before.
Mm.
So that kind of became like this very homespun like workshop of here's base level how to puppeteer, which worked really well with the other experienced puppeteers because they really loved relaying the knowledge. Also because there is a skill to wait, how do I know what I know? How do I relay what I know? And so they also enjoyed like helping to teach these newbies, these novices. The second Puppet Jam, I led a workshop that I was about to take down to the University of Central Florida, which was building puppets out of trash. And so we had a really fun time with that. And then this last Puppet Jam, this last Saturday, was our first like theme night, which was Toy Theater. Um, yeah, so people just come and play. The couple of people that came this last time, we had somebody who really just has like visual design experience, but wants to like understand puppets better so they could design puppets better. I was like, great, that's important. You know, people need comfortable puppets.
Yeah.
We also had somebody who was just a librarian and like thinks puppets are cool, so they had just as much fun as the rest of us.
Oh, that's really fantastic. It sounds like something that I don't know how this will come about in the future, but it sounds like something that XPT and the Atlanta Puppet Jam need to come together in some way to bring in new people into that experience, because that sounds really great. Um, so when is your next one? What's up and coming for the Atlanta
Uh,
Puppet Jam?
the yeah, so the next one is April 27th. So currently, the puppet jams are the second and fourth Saturday of every month in the evening. You can find more information at atlantapuppetjam.com or on Instagram at Atlanta Puppet Jam, just all one word. And the next one's April 27th. We've been talking, we've been experimenting with maybe finding another night with new things like this. You know, we're trying to find the right balance. When I was first like experimenting with this idea, people said Saturday, but then now they've come back and said, well, I can't actually make Saturday.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find the best night. If there's a night that works for people, you know, send me a direct message on Instagram and say this is great. If it was meh, I think maybe we might want to try experimenting with maybe it's like second Wednesday or Saturday if that's not too confusing. But for now, we're on Saturdays, and the next one's April 27th. We're going with a theme for the month, so we'll have another toy theater night, which the last one was such a hoot. So I'm excited to see how it just grows from there. Yeah.
And that'll be announced on social media what the theme is.
Yeah. So we'll keep doing like we did. And so in the last Puppet Jam of the month in March, we had people put things in a bucket as to what they wanted their theme to be, and then we drew. And so we drew out for April Toy Theater. So please come to the April 27th Jam, and you can suggest what the theme will be for the next month. Because for the very first few jams, we just kind of like left it open as to like whatever types of puppetry, just to kind of get a feel for what we're doing. But it is kind of nice to have a focus. Also, because I was like bringing out any and all puppets, and it was kind of nice this past Saturday to be like, okay, I'm just bringing out the toy theater, like toy theaters. I got multiples, but not like also bringing out the hand puppets and the rod puppets and everything else. So.
Sky, it has been absolutely fantastic talking with you. I'm so glad that I just kind of came across your social media because unfortunately, for whatever reason, I just did not know about you. So this has been so illuminating and I just love it. Yeah, I hope everyone does who's involved with XPT this year and anyone else who is interested will go and play with you guys at these jams because they sound amazing.
So thank you, and thanks for helping me to get the word out. You know, it's a new thing. It's
Yeah.
all experiment and play. So I appreciate. I'm so glad you came across it, and I'm so excited for to see how it just continues to grow. So thanks for helping to get the word out. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, of course. Um,